T minus 1 minute. Let me put some lip gloss on. Because it matters. Welcome, beautiful souls. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to get started in a few seconds. Yeah, literally a few seconds. You are in the right place if you have watched all 5 parts of my Dr. Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural Chapter 1 breakdown. I read them for you so that you don't have to do the hard work. You can listen as you go. But on days like this, Fridays at 8 p.m. and Tuesdays at 8 p.m., I break down the sections that I've uploaded and we have a discussion. We have a live discussion. So I want to welcome you to tonight's discussion of parts 4 and 5 of chapter 1. If you have not looked at parts 1 through 3, which is Anna's story, I highly recommend that you do because it's amazing. It's shocking some of the things that she was able to evolve from, but it was inspiring to see how she was able to overcome those things. But without further ado, it's 8 p.m. and I am on time, y'all. I am on time. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Whether you're joining me live or you're catching the replay, I'm so grateful, so happy that you're here. I'm Brittany, your manifesting mentor, not a guru and not a coach, but a woman who lives this work and helps others embody it too, so they can become who they are truly meant to be. So tonight we're continuing Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. We're diving into parts 4 and 5 of chapter 1. And trust me, this is where it gets mystical. So if you've ever felt that there's more to life than what meets the eye, you are in the right space. And before we get started, I do want to encourage you to be engaging in the comments. Drop a comment, a question you may have from another chapter that you've read or you've listened to, because it helps keep the conversation going. I will address them, whether I address it in this live or I'd address it in another live or a video on my TikTok or my social media. You never know. But I will address your comment and whatever dialogue you provide. I sectioned this live off because I like to keep things in a state of flow. I don't want to ramble too much. I want to hit the points that really stood out for me. And I want to make sure that I hit points that can help drive things home for other people who may be tuned into this content. So for section 1, we're going to talk about Dr. Joe's mystical meditation experience. And I wrote some key talking points for this. It's basically pages 15 through 22. And by the way, if you want to purchase the book, I have the link, direct link in the description of this video as well as my other videos. So you can also do that as well. So one of the key talking points from Dr. Joe's mystical meditation experience is the section of the chapter 1 where he titles it Getting Mystical. He basically describes a profound meditative state where he experienced oneness with everything. And as a matter of fact, I highlighted a part of the book of that section where he says becoming supernatural can also involve embracing a greater awareness of yourself and who you are in this world and in other worlds as well. And that's basically him setting the tone to let you know that while you can get deep in your meditation, you also can have experiences that are seemingly otherworldly and also of other timelines. And we'll get into that too. So he describes this meditation where he experiences oneness with everything. And he says he realized that he wasn't separate from anything. I sense oneness with everything, everyone, every place, and every time. And I can only describe it as the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling that I've ever had in my life. And I wrote some notes for that because I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I always say that wisdom is of the soul. There will be times in your life where you just hear something or you experience something and you get a message from it that speaks just to you. Because for whatever reason, you may or may have not had experiences with that topic. And he had a moment in his meditation where he had an experience and he saw these different symbols that were really vivid in his meditation. He describes it as really vivid, like a timepiece or a watch, a pocket watch. And it was something else that he saw. I can't recall right now, but he knew what those things meant. And he got the message that was just right for him from those things. And this is what wisdom is. Wisdom is knowledge of the soul, and it surpasses what we think we know intellectually. And as a matter of fact, I think I highlighted a quote. It says, um, when you become nobody, no thing, in no time, you enter a realm where all potentials exist. And that is exactly what he was saying. Like, he had these experiences where nothing really quite made sense, but for whatever reason, it made sense to his soul. And so he said he couldn't feel his body. He was in no time, no space, just pure awareness. And this is what happens when you practice meditation and you're able to slow those brain waves down from what he says is a beta brainwave state, which is when we're super analytical, we're awake, we're thinking about this and that, and we got a lot of chatter going on. That's beta. When we meditate, we slow our brain waves down to alpha, which is where we are less analytical and we're less, reflective of what's happening outside of us. And then we can go even deeper into theta and gamma states. And those are the states where you can experience mystical experiences like what Dr. Joe describes in chapter 1. Um, he also said that it was euphoric, it was expansive and deeply healing. And I've heard others in the community talk about this. I personally have not had a deep, what do you call it, a transcendental experience in my meditations. I've had dreams that were transcendental, which is a whole nother topic, maybe, maybe not, but I haven't done it in meditation form. But he says that this moment helped him understand that the quantum field responds to who we are being, not what we are doing. And this really stood out to me because I've been a student of mystical teachings, esoteric teachings from people like Neville Goddard for a good portion of my life, right? Like, I've learned about law of attraction very early on in my life. People like Florence Scovel Shinn, Ernest Holmes, like, these are people who teach very philosophical, esoteric, mystical teachings, but for some reason they resonate with you. You know the truth by the way it feels, right? So when I came across people like Joe, and to hear his experience and for him to make the statement that the quantum field responds to who you are being, not what you are doing, that to me spoke to the premise of law of assumption. Neville Goddard teaches through law of assumption that everything is you pushed out. Whatever you are conscious of being, whatever you are assuming to be true, that is what you will get reflected back to you. And Joe breaks it down using scientific jargon because he says the quantum field, right? Neville doesn't call it the quantum field. He calls it the powers that be. Basically, he has different terminology for it, but Joe calls it the quantum field, and he said that this responds to who you are being. Neville talks about self-concept because how you see yourself, how you are showing up is going to govern. It's going to paint your entire reality based on how you show up because of who you think you are. And so I love Dr. Joe's work because it helps me in my brain marry esoteric, mystical teachings with the logical side of my brain, the analytical side of my brain that understands practicality and science and tangibles, right? So he's helping to demystify the mystical. If that makes sense, put some fire emojis in the chat because to me, that was my aha moment. Like, yes, this is what we're doing. Also, if you've ever had a moment where time seemed to pause or you felt deeply connected to something greater than yourself, I want you to comment about that as well. Like I mentioned, I have yet to have a mystical experience myself, but if you watch any of the stories of transformation on Dr. Joe's YouTube channel, or if you tune into this community at all, so many people have had transcendental experiences, transcendental meditations, where they've had these very profound, real, in their minds, experiences that felt real, even though they were still in their physical bodies. They had these transcendental experiences that felt otherworldly, but they felt very real. And it was transformative in a lot of ways. Also, as we get into the next section, um, I'll reference another video that I talked about. But someone submitted a question. I do allow for questions to be submitted ahead of time just to keep the conversation flowing. And they said, can anyone access this kind of state, or is it just for advanced meditators? And I think that's a great question. And actually, Dr. Joe speaks to this. He says, yes, anybody can access the state of consciousness. He says these states are not just reserved for gurus, they come with practice. The more you train your mind and your body to surrender, the more likely you are to have experiences. I'm sorry, the more likely you are to experience elevated, even mystical states of consciousness. And I also heard him say one time that he likes working with people who have not been doing the work for so long because they tend to be less analytical, which means they have less resistance to receiving the information. Their analytical minds is not questioning every little thing. So they're able to like slip into states of alpha and theta a lot with a lot less resistance than someone who has more analytical mindset. Meaning, sometimes if you meditate for a long period of time and you trained yourself into it, sometimes you will grow more analytical than somebody who doesn't know this work. I don't know why that is, but our human brains, our bodies are designed to resist change. And so the more you know intellectually, sometimes that is the barrier to your breakthrough because you know too much. So you question too much, if that makes any sense. There's a space where you get into where you need to just surrender and let that be that. All right. So I'm going to get into section two. Oh, actually, there was a question that came in on one of my videos for chapter one, part three. This person says, how often and how long should I start to meditate? I'm a beginner. When I try, it seems boring. I don't know if it's working for me, but I do not do it that often. This was from Johanna Ya. Thank you for your question, Johanna. That's a great question. Back to what Dr. Joe says, I really don't think that, I think that how long you meditate and what inspires you to meditate is a very personal thing. People come into this work for all sorts of reasons. Some people come into this work because they want to heal from something. Some people come into this work because they might maybe suffer from mental health and they just want to learn how to calm themselves within. Some people come into this work to learn how to be intentional creators, how to dimensionalize objects out of nowhere, right? Like that's how, the more you get into this work, the more you'll be able to learn about what you're capable of. But whatever inspires you is going to dictate how often you think you need to meditate. There's no rule, right? But I would say the more you do it, the better you get at it. So self mastery is totally up to you, right? And as far as the part where you said it seems so boring, that is exactly what I just spoke on. Your brain and body will try to fight you for familiarity because we're designed to resist change. And it's not a self-sabotage thing, it's more so a self-preservation thing. When your body and your brain feels like it can predict the future or predict what's next, it feels safe. So when you're lingering in that unknown situation of meditation, your brain and your body doesn't feel safe. So it's going to resist and it's going to feel boring, right? But Dr. Joe teaches that there's no such thing as a bad meditation. There's no such thing as not getting it right. There's no wrong way to do it, right? The only wrong way to do it is if you quit. You're not doing it. So, but there's no wrong way. And again, the more you do it, the better you get. The more you master yourself to, I liken it to the ultimate self-care. We like to think about self-care as going to the spa and things like that. But to me, the ultimate self-care is to love yourself enough to sit with yourself and get to know yourself, get to know the thoughts that are in your mind, get to scan your body and get acquainted with your organs. Like, this is how intimate meditation really is if you take your practice there. Um, if you don't think you're worth, investing time and energy into, then yeah, I don't know really what's worth more of your energy and attention than spending that energy and attention on yourself and your relationship with yourself and the divine. But again, it's all preferential, whatever you prefer. She also said, okay, I did my research and I started my journey today of meditating on a daily basis, all because of this video, sister. Well, I am so glad that I could be a part of your meditation journey. That's amazing. And that's also why I choose to show up here, because I don't know who's supposed to get this message, but I know that it showed up for me in a divine way. Like I spoke about in the last live, how I got locked into this work because I was meditating with a group from England during lockdown, during the pandemic in 2020. And we were meditating twice a week. And the person who held the space for us basically shared the book. And I didn't read it right away, but I stumbled upon something on my timeline, and it made me remember that I saw Dr. Joe in the meditation group that I was meditating with, and one thing led to another, and I ended up getting his course. It's a cool story behind that, but you got to watch my last live for that story. But yeah, I feel like it showed up in a divine way. And so if you're watching this is for you. And whether you start right away or you start 5 years from now, it came into your awareness. So I think nothing happens by coincidence. And she says also, nice, the power in us, the power is in us if only we do the work to tap in. And she said, a great testimony from Anna. Each one teach one. When you reach one, you teach one. Actually, I'm a teacher, teacher, former educator, but I decided that I wanted to teach what felt more right for me. And this kind of work is what feels more right for me than what I was teaching in public schools. And that's a whole nother story that we'll get into. But I want to keep things moving. So we'll move on to section 2, which is living a past incarnation in the present. This is pages 23 through 26. And this is where Dr. Joe starts talking about a past incarnation, a past life. And he actually titled the section, Experience and Past and Future Selves Simultaneously. And he describes this really cool experience where he saw himself as a little boy, and then he saw himself as an adult, but then he also saw himself as an older man, more evolved version of himself. So he was able to experience these different sections of his life, even the parts of his life that he has yet to live, I mean his older self. He was able to experience all of these things, and somehow he knew it was happening simultaneously at the same time while he was in a meditative state. So he was meditating on his couch as Dr. Joe Dispenza today, not today, it was in years ago, but in this present day. He was meditating as himself, and he went back in childhood and had a moment that felt very present and real. And then he went into his current self, washing the dishes or such. And then he went into a future version of himself. And so basically, he had a vision of living as someone else in another time in incredible detail. And some people report having these kinds of experiences. Again, I have not had that experience myself yet. But it got so real for him that he didn't believe in past lives until this moment. And the memory felt extremely real. And the message that he got was that consciousness exists beyond time. And we are more than just this physical identity. And so one of the quotes that I highlighted from this section was that the soul has a memory far older than the brain. And I like to talk about this in terms of wisdom, because wisdom is knowledge that's for the soul, right? Intellectual knowledge is the things that we can read, the philosophy, the the tangible things, right? The lessons we learn in this 3D reality. But wisdom is something that transcends time. It's like my grandmother, I told this story before, but my grandmother used to call me an old soul when I was a little girl, between the ages of like 3 and maybe 7, right? Because to her, she felt like I had a knowing about me that wasn't something that you could teach a child, right? I just had this, I liked things that older people liked. you know, I caught on to things when words were being spoken around me. I could pick up on certain things, right? And she would always be like, well, how does this child know this? And I think it's because we all come into this lifetime with a level of wisdom from possibly from past lives. But there's a knowingness that we have that can't be taught. I got a 2-year-old nephew, and he, to me, is very wise beyond his years because he can barely even talk full sentences, but he knows what's happening around him, and he'll give you indications in his own baby way that he understands what's happening, even if he doesn't have the language yet. So that to me is what Dr. Joe is speaking about when he says the soul has a memory far older than the brain. And as he describes this transcendental past life past life, present life, future life, incarnation, he also tells the story um, of another life, like a completely, totally different, separate identity from Dr. Joe Dispenza. But it was him, but he wasn't Dr. Joe. He was a different kind of teacher, a different kind of philosopher in a different day and age. And he lived a very different life. And I think we'll get into that one next in the next section. But what my insight is, what this tells me is that we aren't just healing in this life, we are awakening across lifetimes. And sometimes remembering who you were is the catalyst for becoming who you are destined to be here. I truly believe that. Sometimes, like with Dr. Joe, he described his experience in meditation with these past lives in such a way that it gave him wisdom to know exactly what he should be doing today. And if you watch my last live, I talked about two videos that I did, a part two video that I did on Kendrick Lamar's song Reincarnated, where he sampled a Tupac Shakur song. And he talked about three past lives that he lived and the wisdom that it gave him in this lifetime. Super deep concepts, but similar to what Dr. Joe experienced. I also linked that below for you, or I linked it in another video. It's somewhere on my YouTube channel, but it's there. Um, but it's interesting stuff. And people talk about past life regression in many, many ways as part of their spiritual evolution and part of their spiritual journeys. So I definitely recommend you check it out just to learn more about it. But this is what Joe is hinting at in chapter 1 of Becoming Supernatural. So someone did submit a question here and they said, is this real or is it just imagination? Because they're talking about the stories that Dr. Joe shares. He also says, like, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter whether it was real or imagined, because he says the body responds to the feeling of the experience, whether it's a metaphor or a memory. What matters is how it shifts you. And I liken this to understanding something about your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind does not know the difference between something that is real and something that is imagined, right? This is how you're able to think your way into a panic attack. This is how you're able to wake up from a dream that feels really real, where you were possibly in danger and running for your life with your heart racing, right? Your body is responding as if it's in real danger, even though you had a dream. So, whether or not it's actually real or imagined, to the body, it's all the same. If it moves you in any way, emotionally, mentally, that's what matters, how it shifts you. So for Dr. Joe, these experiences shifted him emotionally to feel more love, to feel more whole, to feel more connected, to feel more oneness. And then as we get into another section, he talks about how he lived a past life where he was a philosopher and he was crucified because he was teaching something in that day and age that the government at that time rebuked, right? He was living a totally different identity than who he is as Dr. Joe Dispenza, but it felt very real for him to be experiencing this identity. He could feel into the person's body. He described tasting the sweat that was on his head, and he described his outfit that he was wearing. And he described a very gruesome scene where he was being crucified similarly to Jesus for teaching these things in a way that freed people from depending on religion or the government. And he was giving them information that he had learned from his own mentor or a spiritual guide. And the government, as it stood, did not like that. So they basically publicly humiliated him by putting him on this machine that stretched out his limbs until he professed that he would never teach again. And as we speak about wisdom, he gathered from that experience that he didn't want to do what he did in that lifetime, because that version of him ended up saying that he would never teach again and going into a cave for the rest of his life and died there. But Dr. Joe, as this identity of Dr. Joe in this present day, understood that that was a message from his soul's wisdom to if he makes the same choice, because at the time he told the story of how he was considering whether or not he wanted to be a public figure anymore. He wanted to go into hiding because people in the science community, when he first started teaching about this stuff, thought it was pseudoscience. They were like, that isn't even real science. But then he started backing it up. But he got really exhausted because, people in the science community were looking at him sideways and they didn't really think his research was legit. Fast forward, it's a totally different story, and so many more people are open because the proof is in the pudding. But at the time was like 2004 or something like that. I might have my dates mixed up, but it was early in the game where a lot of people weren't receptive, not in the religious sector and definitely not in the science field. So he learned from that experience of living that identity of a great philosopher who was basically tortured out of not teaching what his soul came here to teach. And he made a decision from that experience that he had in meditation, living that identity. He said that in this life, he's willing to take the risk. He doesn't care what comes with it because his goal is to help free people from what pains them, free them from the tradition of what, you know, limits them in terms of what they're capable of. He wants to help people become what we came here to be, which is supernatural. We have some pretty incredible capabilities as humans, but society as it stands doesn't allow us to tap into any of that because we don't learn about ourselves in that way. And unless your parents are very much into this kind of stuff, you probably would never learn it, unless you went out and ventured out and, as a seeker sought this information. It's not going to come to you via your public school system, or via your church or via your mosque or via a lot of it just won't. There's always somehow some way a middleman involved, and you have to go through that middleman to get to your divinity. You have to go through that government, that preacher, that rabbi, that you have to go through sources to get to your source. And that's the way we've been taught. And being supernatural is completely opposite. And he's willing to go there. He had a podcast that he was invited on where he talked about someone asked him something along the lines of, aren't you afraid to be teaching this? Because a lot of people might give you a lot of slack. And he's like, I've been there, done that. That happened already. And he doesn't fear that. But what he said was, and I thought it was super dope, but he said, by that time, it's too many of us. You can't take us all out. We're all leading by example. We're all being the demonstration of possibility. Meaning, however many people he's taught that are convinced of this work, however many people understand how to work with their bodies and how to tap into their supernatural abilities, the more the merrier, because at this point, there is no one particular leader. If you get rid of Dr. Joe, it's too many people that already know the work. It's too many people already spreading the knowledge, of self. And what I like about him is that he's not teaching you to put him on a pedestal. I love Dr. Joe, don't get me wrong, but he's not the first to teach this stuff, So I don't have a sense of loyalty to be sharing this information aside from the fact that the formula is a beautiful formula and it's simplified in such a way that anybody could grasp it. And when you do the work, anybody and everybody can experience mysticism for themselves. They don't need Dr. Joe to do it. He talks about it all the time. People will read his book, and just from reading his book, they don't have to go to a workshop. They don't have to take his course. They just do the work and they're getting miraculous healings at home, or they're experiencing a better quality of life in their day to day because they do the meditations. Like, you don't need a middleman to get to your divinity. It's in you, not on you, as Nipsey Hussle used to say. It's in you, not on you, right? And that's what we can appreciate, or at least I can appreciate about Dr. Joe Dispenza in these teachings. Um, I went on a little tangent, y'all, but this work really makes me go there, right? Um, yeah, that was parts 4 and 5 of Becoming Supernatural. I would say this: if you've been feeling called to something bigger than what you've known, these chapters are your invitation to explore that. Okay. We're not just here to learn, we're here to embody. And that speaks exactly to why Dr. Joe said he ain't never scared. He ain't never scared because there are too many people that hear and learn this work and they are willing to embody this work. They are willing to embark on a journey to learn themselves and truly embody this work. And to remember that the mystical is not far away, it's already within you. You don't have to look here or there for the kingdom of heaven. The Bible taught you that. For lo and behold, the kingdom of heaven is where? Within. And that's why I rock with Dr. Joe's teachings, because you don't need a middleman to get to your divinity. You don't need a middleman. He's literally giving you a formula to learn your body, learn your own consciousness, learn what program you've been running on. And if it ain't working for you no more, learn how to change it. Rewire your mind, rewire your brain, and change your electromagnetic field that is your energetic field of expressed emotions, your patterns. When you learn that stuff, you don't need a middleman to your divinity. It's in you, not on you. Yeah, that's why we rock with Dr. Joe. So if you haven't watched the previous parts of chapter 1, go check out my playlist on YouTube. And if you want help anchoring this work into your daily life, grab my free guide. It's 7 Thoughts to Unshakable Faith. The link is in the description or anywhere on any of my profiles. And be sure to follow and subscribe so you're ready for chapter 2. So we're going into the science of how to actually start the transformation process. So the young lady who asked the question about meditation, like where to start, this is for you, sis. If you are curious on how to start, you've never meditated, you don't need to have a background in any of this stuff. This is for everybody who is a human. If you got a body and you got the same organs as me, this is for you. Okay. And we're going to dive into how to get our bodies and our minds on board to start the transformation process. And hopefully you learned a great deal about where to start from Anna's story. Her very dramatic story, honey. That story was intense. I'll never forget it. I made my nephew read that, by the way, as one of his punishment for something he did. I made him read chapter 1 of Becoming Supernatural. But at least he knows now that, we might be able to do some things outside of what's normal. So great punishment. Anyways, I would say that be sure to follow and subscribe for chapter 2 because we're going to get started. I will upload those videos as early as Sunday. And then as I mentioned before, I'll start going live regularly on Tuesdays and Fridays to discuss the different parts of each chapter. Because what I realized is it was real cute when I wanted to read each chapter live. But I was like, yeah, no, we're going to record them and we're going to let people watch them in their own time. And then we'll go live to discuss it. So that's the formula that works. And I love that people who aren't able to meet me on live, they still come back and watch these videos and they've been commenting and it's giving me great content to talk about on the live. So if that sounds like you, I get it. I'm not offended. We in this together. We all adulting, right? Like we're trying to make time for ourselves. But I just want to thank each and every one of you. If you're watching live or if you're watching the replay, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up for yourself and for being a part of this sacred community that I am building, that we are building. Pat yourself on the back for being willing to learn about this stuff and to become supernatural, to become like the great people that we celebrate in history, like the Jesus Christ, like the Nelson Mandelas, like the people that we celebrate for being great and overcoming whatever obstacles they might be facing by understanding a lot of these principles that Dr. Joe talks about, that we've heard about in various ways, various teachings. But the way he marries mysticism with science, it really just adds another layer and makes it easy for anybody, no matter your faith, to tap into, to learn what Jesus was doing when he was healing people, what he was doing and how he was able to see other people through the eyes of God. Like, that's how deep this work goes. It's beyond meditation. It's really allowing you to be more like the divine. And I can only explain it that way, but words don't do it justice. You'll see. Trust me. And like I mentioned, you can watch Stories of Transformation on Dr. Joe Dispenza's YouTube channel. He has stories of transformation, thousands of people who are just like me and you. They're not super woo-woo special. They are not gurus. They're not monks. They are just like you and I. They started out with blank slates. Some of them had scientific backgrounds. Some of them are doctors. Some of them are, they have all kinds of jobs. And they come from all kinds of backgrounds and cultures. And they're doing this work. They're doing this work. And they're helping to elevate the frequency of the planet by changing themselves. Michael Jackson said, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change, because it really does start with you. And if each person took accountability for themselves to change themselves, you're doing more for the world than you really will ever know. Because the people in your life get to benefit from that, but not just them. They go out and influence other people. So there's a domino effect to becoming supernatural. You don't just elevate the quality of your own life, you elevate the quality of the lives of people who are associated with you, who get to engage with you on a day-to-day basis. And then they go out in the world and do the same. And then the people that they touch go out and touch other people. So there's a rippling effect. And Dr. Joe talks about this. It's the premise of his project Coherence, which is his nonprofit. I talked about that in my last live. But this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. And if there are no other questions, I will conclude here because it is Friday night and I don't know what you got planned, but first of all, I need to eat. That's my first plan. And then after that, we'll see. But I'm so glad that you spent your Friday evening with me. Thank you for being here or whenever you're watching this. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but this is your reminder and you got this. Bye, guys.